everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight on a Tuesday evening at 6:15. A special welcome and thank you to our distinguished speakers who have traveled from far and near to lead our panel discussion tonight. Today's event is taking place in the context of the 63rd United Nations Commission on the Status of Women, which promotes women's rights, documents the reality of women's lives throughout the world, and shapes global standards and gender equality and the empowerment of women. Our panel discussion focuses on women leaders and decision makers across cultures, lessons from psychology. It was organized by the UN team of the Society for the Psychological Study of Social Issues, which has been represented at the United Nations as an NGO since 1987. Our discussion tonight will focus on strategies to overcome structural and attitudinal barriers to women's full participation in all areas of life and on how to build capacity for women to succeed in leadership roles. Dr. Maureen O'Connor, currently president of Palo Alto University in California, will talk about mentoring in academic context. She will discuss how the social justice framework that she has developed can be applied to women's leadership. Ms. Thelma Viale, a partner at an international human resources firm, Kennedy Fitch, former director of the International Labour Organization Office at the United Nations, will discuss women at the workplace across cultures and will highlight strategies to foster opportunities for women to succeed in the world of work. Dr. Teresa Vecchio is psychology professor at Pennsylvania State University. She will address gender stereotypes and will discuss how they act as impediments to girls' and women's participation in decision-making and leadership. More about our speakers a little later. Next year marks the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Platform of Action. It identified 3 barriers to the implementation of its ambitious goals for gender equality: persistence of gender stereotypes, lack of human and financial resources, and limited participation of women in decision-making processes. Our discussion tonight will reflect all these 3 issues. Before we proceed, I will bring in some statistics to gain perspective and make us aware of the complex social ecosystem we all live in. $263 million children, adolescents, and youth were out of school this year, representing nearly 1/5 of the global populations of this age group. Girls of primary school age are still more likely to be out of school compared to boys. Of course, we all know that educating women and girls is the best way to change the world. In our volatile world, according to the World Health Organization, an estimated 80% of 50 million people affected by violent conflict, civil wars, disasters, and displacement are women and children. Lifetime prevalence rate of violence against women ranges from 16% to 50%. In addition to the gender-based health vulnerabilities, women increasingly feel the health impacts of NCD, which is non-communicable diseases such as cardiovascular, cancer, diabetes, depression, and other mental and neurological challenges. Older women are the most vulnerable. According to the WHO, NCDs, once thought to occur mainly in wealthier countries, are increasingly felt by women globally. They account for 80% of deaths among adult women in high-income countries and 25% of deaths among adult women in low-income countries. Women make up the bulk of the healthcare workforce, but so few are in the top leadership roles. 40% of CEOs of healthcare concerns are women. The lack of women in leadership positions has a major impact on health policies. Access to work in conditions of dignity and safety is a fundamental right. The current global labor force participation rate for women is close to 49%. For men, it's 75%. The difference is 26 percentage points, with some regions facing a gap of more than 50 percentage points. Finding a job is much tougher for women than it is for men. When women are employed, they tend to work in low-quality jobs and in vulnerable conditions. Men are more likely to be working in their own business, while women are likely to be helping out in their households or their relatives' business. Women across the globe, 70% of them prefer to work in paid jobs than take care of their families, according to a recent ILO study. Women are underrepresented as voters, as well as in leadership, in leading positions in elected offices, the civil service, the private sector, or academia. 24.3% of women are parliamentarians. When they have positions in the government, they lead soft ministries such as health, education, or women and children's welfare, and still only rarely get finance, home, security, or foreign affairs portfolios. So, in conclusion, the participation of women in decision-making, in decisions that affect their lives, is important for women, but the participation of women and the incorporation of women's perspective in decisions is critical for everyone. To paraphrase the Secretary General, we cannot tackle issues of peace, poverty, prejudice, or climate change without the full participation of half of the world population. For the last few months, now I have to say something about our two wonderful student interns. For the last few months, Ms. Maya Goodball has worked incessantly on this project. She deserves most of the credit, and she will act as the discussants for this panel. Ms. Priya Sandapichal is responsible for the amazing artwork on the program. She's going to facilitate the question and answer session. My colleague, Dr. David Lever, will further introduce each of the speakers.
Thank you, Rachel. Good evening. It is a beautiful evening, evolving into a beautiful evening, and thank you for sharing it with us tonight. I'm the main representative of SPSSI to the United Nations, and which gives me I'm very truly gratified for the privilege of being able to introduce to you these fantastic women tonight. First off, Dr. Maureen O'Connor, current president of Palo Alto University, which is an institution of higher learning committed to research and clinical training in psychology, but also committed to diversity and improving the human condition. Maureen is formerly from around here. She is an emeritus from John Jay College and the CUNY Graduate Center, where she chaired the program in psychology for the entire Graduate Center. She works in the intersection of psychology, gender, and law, and is also very interested and committed to the improvement of teaching. In fact, this month, maybe, there is a new book called Teaching Psychology, an Evidence-Based Approach by Wiley. We don't have any to sell, but there it is. Congratulations, Maureen. Maureen earned both a PhD and a JD at the University of Arizona. She's held numerous governance positions in the American Psychological Association, including its Human Rights Task Force, and in the Society for the Psychological Study of Issues. of social issues, including president of SPSSI. It is in the capacity of president of SPSSI that I got to know Maureen from my stint on the governing council. I saw a really fantastic and effective and a motivating leader. She was just a dream to work for and with. She supported me so much on council when I co-chaired SPSSI's biennial conference, and certainly and most importantly supported me in the arrival of my son. You remember that? You do. All right. So on behalf of SPSSI's United Nations team, we are very, very honored to introduce Dr. Maureen O'Connor.
I was going to say the same thing about you. I had the honor of getting to know you when I was president of SPSSI and working with David. So thank you very much for that lovely introduction and for this wonderful invitation to speak tonight. It was actually in my role as president of SPSSI at the same time that I was running a very large doctoral program and really figuring out my sea legs in administration that I started to think about the subject of my talk tonight, which is how do those of us who get into positions of leadership enact the goals of the organizations that we're part of, instead of just falling into some of the traps of leadership that are so easy to fall into when you're running a fairly any size organization, honestly. And in my 2012 SPSSI presidential address, which I titled Embodied Social Justice, getting back to our embodiment discussion, I encourage us there to think about how we might enact SPSSI's mission through social justice infused administrative and organizational policies and structures, in addition to or in support of the other work that we have to do in our university settings in the academy. And the importance of that topic was actually brought home to me in an exercise David might remember at SPSSI Council, where here is an organization of people with dedication to social justice and serving SPSSI for that very reason. And when we went around council at Allen...
Can you speak a bit louder?
Speak up
Sorry,
louder?
yeah.
Yes.
Is there a microphone?
Do we have a microphone?
Yes.
No, that's okay. I'm going to put it in front of us. How's that? Better? All right, great. Anyway, our wonderful colleague Alan Emoto did an exercise where we went around SPSSI Council to say what brought us to SPSSI. And what was distressing, honestly, about that conversation was the number of people in that room who said something like, well, now that I have tenure, I can return to my social justice roots. Or since my scholarship has had to veer away from community engaged work, which isn't valued by my department, I need SPSSI's connection to support that work, et cetera, et cetera. And here we were in a room full of social justice scholars, realizing that our own institutions weren't necessarily supporting the kind of work that we were all wanting to do. And then going back and rereading Kurt Lewin's amazing work when I was developing the presidential address, I realized he himself was never accepted in psychology. If you look back at his career, his positions were in economics or sociology or somewhere else. And I thought, okay, we are now in a position, as we move into these leadership positions, to do something about this, essentially this workplace layer of social justice that seems to have been forgotten, even for those of us who participate in social justice-oriented organizations, and I consider universities should be at least in that category. So in my own experience as an academic leader, I've found little space for discussion of how best to enact in our day-to-day lives as faculty, as students, as administrators, the lofty principles we hold for our academic scholarly work. Instead, we're asked to meet targets, reduce budgets, do more with less, check boxes that say we comply, and sort of make sure the ship runs without that extra layer of focus on attention to social justice. So I talk then, and I think about every day, how our psychological understanding of gender, which I think we're going to hear a fair amount about in a few minutes, and other stereotypes constrain and constrict what effective leadership looks like. I remember President Teresa Sullivan, who was an amazing leader at the University of Virginia, was fired by her board and then rehired and is now retired. But she said something that really resonated with me, which is, she said it while she was in the fired part of her couple of weeks of being fired by this board, that she's been described as an incrementalist. It's true, she said.